The man was reborn a month before the apocalypse, yet he sold stocks worth 3 billion for a mere 1 billion. He hoarded 1 billion tons of supplies directly, all because in 90 days, a global apocalyptic crisis will break out. 80% of humanity will turn into zombies. Of the remaining humans, 90% will die at the hands of zombies, and the small remaining portion of humans will begin to evolve and develop special abilities. Some have physical abilities, some elemental, and some are mental. Xiaoyong realized that some people never change, and since these two bullies still work together, he could only wonder how much they were ripping off the supermarket. Soon they arrived at the wholesale warehouse together. An expensive car drove up to them rather carelessly. From the way Xingzhi drove arrogantly, our hero realized that he had probably never been scammed before, and it was time to fix that. It was a meeting of old friends, although the arrogant boss didn't recognize our hero right away, and Tao had to remind that they once went to middle and high school together. Even so, Shangzhi had a hard time remembering who Xiaoyang was at first, but after thinking for a while he finally remembered. It was exactly that guy with a bit of a backbone. Shangzhi took one look at his former classmate. He didn't like the cheap non-designer clothes at all. He despised people who pretended to be rich when they weren't. Shangzhi had already made a conclusion about our hero based on his clothes. He immediately turned to teach this idiot a lesson for bringing him such a useless big client and wasting his time. Shangzhi even gave him a kick in the ass to think better next time, even though Tao tried to stand his ground. Knowing that Xiaoyong was actually rich, Shangzhi couldn't even allow such a thought. He had been in this business for years, and as he thought he could tell at a glance who was rich and who wasn't. Xiaoyong saw that some people never change, and called Shangzhi an illiterate who looks down on people. Shangzhi immediately grabbed him and demanded him to repeat what he just said. Xiaoyong was absolutely not afraid of him, and repeated to his face that he looked down on people, but it turned out that it was not this that offended him at all, but the fact that our hero called him illiterate. This was not what Xiaoyong had expected. It turned out that this bastard was really shameless. Tao, seeing the impending fight, hurriedly intervened and advised our hero not to touch Shangzhi door point. He is really illiterate, so he hates to be called like that. But for saying that, Tao received another kick and insults from Shangzhi, who was angry because he was not allowed to do what he wanted. Turning to our hero, Xingzhi gave him a condition: either Xiaoyong buys a truckload of goods from him, or crawl back on all fours. Our hero was more than satisfied with this. He ordered Shangzhi to let go of his collar and call out the account number. In just a moment the angry expression on Shang's face changed to a shocked one. Xiaoyong had somehow actually transferred 1 million into his account. According to our hero, it was only a deposit. He had plans to buy 5 million worth of goods. Shangzhi asked what kind of goods he needed. Xiaoyong replied that he needed oil, rice, salt, snacks, and drinks. Simply put, the products that didn't spoil for a long time. An imperceptible smile appeared on Shangzhi's face. He had just received a batch of almost expired food, and this was the perfect opportunity to slip it to Xiaoyong. Upon arriving at the warehouse with the food, Shangzhi offered our hero to pick up the entire shipment at a discount of 10% off the original wholesale price. The offer was great, however Xiaoyong realized that Shangzhi wouldn't sell him food at such a cheap price so simply, so the first thing he decided to do was to check the quality of the food, as Xiaoyong suspected it was a trap. Although the packaging looked new, the food was almost expired. Shangzhi didn't expect Xiaoyong to figure out his plans so quickly. He immediately offered him a discount of as much as 50%, but our hero wasn't satisfied with this deal. With this 5 million he intended to buy the highest quality food, however he had plans for this expired product as well. Xiaoyong told Shang that he was willing to take the expired goods from him for half the price, but with the condition that the payment would be made in a month. Shangzhi was incredulous at our hero's words, but Xiaoyong replied that he would pledge his house. Shangzhi was confused because he didn't understand why Xiaoyong needed the expired food. He couldn't even suspect that after a while, even this expired food would be worth its weight in gold. Xiaoyong didn't intend to go into details and told Shangzhi to deliver the goods to him at the right address. Suddenly someone called to our hero regarding the sale of a house. Quickly saying goodbye to Shangzhi and Tao, he left. The buyer was an old man who was ready to pay 400,000 down payment and give Xiaoyong 3 months to move out. Everything was going so well that it made our hero a little wary. He asked the old man why he was in such a hurry. He replied that his granddaughter was about to change schools and she needed a place to live. Xiaoyong was the only one selling the house in the neighborhood. The old man was so honest that he gave Xiaoyong all the information himself. Our hero asked if he was afraid that with this information, he might raise the price. The old man realized his mistake, and in a panic began to beg our hero not to do this, as it was all his savings. Xiaoyong was not a scumbag who took advantage of innocent people's kindness. He replied that their deal was on, then signed the contract. The old man was incredibly happy, for now his granddaughter had a place to live. He was so kind and polite that he even apologized to Xiaoyong for distracting him from his work. Realizing how kind and honest the old man was, Our hero felt that he and his granddaughter would not last a month in the apocalypse. Calling out to the old man who was already leaving, he asked him for his address. After a while, Xiao Yang arrived at his own land, where work was in full swing. After telling the foreman that the payment would be transferred soon, he inquired about the progress. As it turned out, almost 80% of the construction had been completed. The protection and thickness of the walls and doors were just as he had requested. The warehouse was based on the factory. There everything was ready, and the warehouse could be used. This was great news. Xiaoyang immediately called Shangzhe, and told him to bring the supplies. Soon the warehouse, more like a doomsday vault, began to fill up with resources. Under Xiaoyang's strict command, everything was ready by evening. As soon as the workers left, our hero could finally evaluate the work done. Everything had gone according to his plan, and now he could exhale. At the same time, the system sent a notification that he had successfully completed the task, for which he received 20 system points. When Xiaoyang opened the system store, he saw that there was a new box with awakened abilities in it. This meant that he could obtain supernatural abilities before the apocalypse began. Xiaoyang bought one box without a second thought. When he opened the box, he obtained a level 1 ability called Mind's Eye, thanks to which he could detect the hostility of the target. Xiaoyang was glad, because in his opinion, this was one of the most useful skills in the early stages of the apocalypse. The system didn't seem to want our hero to relax, as it soon sent him another task. This time he needed to obtain weapons, lots of weapons. Xiaoyang didn't mind at all, as that was exactly what he intended to do. It was time to get some guns, with the new task at hand to arm himself for the upcoming apocalypse. Zhang Xiaoyang found himself in the seedy underbelly of the city, the busy late-night black market. Walking around, he could hear the incessant haggling and obnoxious noises of customers and sellers trying to get better deals for themselves. There were scammers everywhere. Suddenly something caught our MC's attention, something he saw out of the corner of his eye. It was a man familiar to him, the man that Chu Jing was clinging to in the first apocalypse, Li Shuxiong. He was aggressively trying to bring down the price of some fake jewelry, eventually whittling down the seller to agree. Zhang Xiaoyang was not expecting to run into this guy tonight, but it made sense that the bastard would be trolling for fake jade bracelets, that which Chu Jing was actually dumb enough to be tricked by fake gifts. A few feet away, he finally found a stall selling some promising wares. Sharp blades were lined up on the floor, each one more lethal than the last. As soon as he laid eyes on those sharp blades, a smile crept up on his face. He finally found what he was looking for. Squatting down in front of the seller, he boldly asked if they sold any hard stuff at this stall. Mr. Camouflage, who looked like a military man, wasn't amused by any of his cryptic messaging. The dude threw him a knife sharpener, telling the young man to grind the blades himself for something harder. Growing more serious, he commented that none of these knives were hard enough. What he was looking for was something a lot tougher. Realizing what he was implying, Mr. Camo turned deathly serious, and asked if he was asking for trouble. Mr. Camo's irritation was interrupted by the sound of his phone notification, that 200,000 yuan had been transferred into his bank account. In front of him was Zhang Xiaoyang holding up the receipt after he sent the astronomical funds through the QR code at the stall. This was his way of pacifying the irate seller and proving that he was a serious buyer. Finally convinced, Mr. Camo called one of his men to come and watch the stall while he handled real business. His attitude towards Zhang Xiaoyang made a 180 degrees turn as he politely led the young man to another building, as talking outside could be a little inconvenient. They did not have any problems entering the innocuous building next to the store. Mr. Camo was now trying to sell Xiaoyang some homemade guns for small targets. They cost 2,000 yuan and ammo would come cheap. Our boy immediately declined. That stoked Mr. Camo's competitive spirit a little bit, so he busted out some replica revolvers modeled after active-duty handguns. For 5,000 yuan you'd get a 9mm shooter. Bullets would be 5 yu a pop. For Xiaoyang, this much was barely acceptable, but he prepaid 200,000 yuan. This junk did not stoke his interest at all. Confused by the mention of prepayment, Mr. Camo asked what he meant by it. Zhang Xiaoyang proclaimed that the initial transfer from earlier was just a 10% prepayment for his order of 2 million yuan worth of weaponry. Mr. Camo was getting a little worried regarding this mysterious buyer affiliation. Xiaoyang made up some BS about how his subordinates usually handle this type of sleazy buys, but he's here now and doesn't appreciate unwelcomed questions regarding his identity. Sensing that the young man must mean some serious business, Mr. Camo respectfully urged him to wait just a moment while frantically running to a different room. He hurriedly turned the lock on the entrance, just to be safe. Mr. Camo also gave the surrounding area a quick look around through the window. He turned to Zhang Xiaoyang and claimed that he came to the right person. Walking closer, he whispered that he'd handle this matter. All he needed was an address, and they'd proceed with the transaction at midnight the day after tomorrow. He'd only accept cash. By the time Zhang Xiaoyang exited the innocuous place, Mr. Camo was practically treating him like a VIP. Xiaoyang was just unlucky enough to get back to the night market street, right when the familiar bastard from earlier was walking around. Li Shuxiong commented on this unexpected meeting in a black market no less. Now it makes sense why the young man has been spending so much lately. There's also the matter of Chu Jing. He reckoned that the kid must have seen too much financial advice lately, and now he's trying to lie flat, sell everything, and live in comfort. Unbothered by all the nonsensical words of a fat bastard, Zhang Xiaoyang thought it would be more practical to just try out his newly acquired ability. Opening his mind's eye, an imperceptible aura lit up his gaze. He could see a happy face indicator on top of Mr. Camo's head, and an angry one on Li Shuxiong's. This was a very useful ability as he had expected, to experiment more. He talked trash about the fat bastard buying fake and second-hand goods to trick Chu Jing. That girl was also his second-hand trash, so it made sense that she was only worth so much. Hearing that made the fat bastard's indicator even angrier as he cursed out the young man after hitting a nerve. Seeing the developing conflict, Mr. Camo stepped in and asked his new big fish client if the fuming fat bastard was bothering Xiao Yong. He labeled Li Shuxiong as an enemy. Taking the hint, Mr. Camo assured his new bid bro that he and his staff would teach the fat bastard a lesson. Xiaoyang was cool with that, but he reminded them not to go too far as he had other plans for Li Shuxiong in the future. Seeing a group of well-built thugs coming after his fat ass, the wannabe gangster started freaking out, stumbling over his words and losing his arrogance. Mr. Camo did not waste any more words on the piece of trash and pulled out a baton. The boys made quick work of the fat bastard, leaving him beaten and bruised in the middle of the dark road. There were shoe prints all over his face, and his white suit from all the kicking he endured. This event only strengthened his distaste for Zhang Xiaoyong. 2 days later, the rendezvous was set at the warehouse, and it seemed like both parties were on time for the agreement. In front of Xiaoyang was a truckload of suspicious crates. This was precisely what he wanted. The arrival of his firearms signaled the success of his battle-ready task, rewarding him with 10 system points, bringing his total up to 20. Inside the crates were heavy firearms, rifles, pistols, and every extra piece of equipment he might need. For some reason, the system also added a bonus reward, a +2 physical enhancement potion. Holding the syringe in his hand, he was pretty pleased with the unexpected drop of this bonus. With the +2 classification, it was even double the efficacy of the one in the system store. Not wasting another second, he lifted that syringe and aimed at his veins. He was expecting a tiny pinch of the needle, but the strength potion coursing through his bloodstream was an agonizing process. As an average adult male, his physical score would be around 5 points. With an increase of +2, that's practically a 40% boost in his overall power. Since that's the case, he resolved to open the system store, his gaze locking in on the other physical enhancement potion listed there. Realizing the value of increased strength while holding another massive syringe, he might as well maximize the advantage it would give. After injecting another strength cheat code, his physical score had finally reached 8. He was practically 60% stronger than an average man, and he was eager to test this out. Seeing some loose iron bars strewn around the warehouse, the idea of testing struck Zhang Xiaoyong. He took one of the iron bars, one of those thick ones used for reinforcing buildings. Xiaoyang threw it up in the air and proceeded to kick it as fast and hard as he could. His attack bent the thick rod quite noticeably. The momentum carried on with the stick flying right into the nearby wall. Xiaoyang's kick was powerful enough to make it a decent dent in a wall through the iron bar. With his current strength, his bare hands are practically weapons now. He would be comfortable going up against an early apocalypse right about now. As for the weapons he just procured, keeping them out in the open would be a stupid move, so it would be better to store them in the spatial ring for safety. Xiaoyang just pointed his magical ring at the contents of the truck, and they were promptly absorbed. If everything proceeds as he remembers, the day after tomorrow will mark the first day of the apocalypse.